Revenge. Discovering my wife's secret getaway with her affair partner. If there's one thing I hope most of you never have to experience, it's the gut-wrenching uncertainty of not knowing whether the person you love is truly faithful. The anxiety that this suspicion has caused me is unlike anything I've ever felt before. It's an all-consuming, mind-numbing paranoia that has turned me into someone I barely recognize. I find myself analyzing her every move, scrutinizing every word she says, and watching her body language for signs of deception. I even catch myself stealing glances at her phone, waiting for the perfect moment to go through it without her knowing. I keep telling myself that maybe I'm wrong, that maybe I'm overthinking things. But deep down, I don't believe that. My instincts are screaming at me that something is off. At first, I wasn't sure if I should share my story here, but I feel like I'm on the verge of losing my mind. I need to vent, and this seems like the best place to do it. Part of me is hoping someone will tell me I'm being paranoid, but I know that's unlikely. The truth feels too obvious, and I might just be the last one to accept it. I'm a 27-year-old man, and my wife, also 27, and I have been married for just 2 years. That's what makes this all the more painful. We're still in what should be the honeymoon phase, and yet here I am, questioning everything. Did I do something wrong as a husband? Could I have prevented this? I know I shouldn't blame myself, but I can't help it. The first signs of trouble. It all started when I noticed a shift in her behavior. My wife, who was usually affectionate and emotionally available, suddenly became distant. At first, I asked her about it, expecting an honest answer. But she brushed it off, insisting that nothing was wrong. Her response felt forced, unconvincing. I let it go, but as the days passed, her coldness continued. I asked again, hoping that she would finally open up, but I was met with the same dismissive response. I started to resent how easily she shut me down, how she acted like I was imagining things. One day, after yet another attempt to talk, she snapped. "I told you I'm fine, okay?" Her tone was sharp, irritated, like I was the one being unreasonable. So, I stopped asking. But I didn't stop noticing. Frustrated, I decided to mirror her energy. If she was going to be distant, I would be distant too. I withdrew emotionally, waiting to see if she would even acknowledge the change. For days, she didn't say a word about it. Then, suddenly, she was back to her normal self, affectionate, smiling, acting as if nothing had happened. No explanation. No apology. No acknowledgement of the weird tension we had just endured. It bothered me, but I let it go. I just wanted to go back to normal. A seed of doubt. I wasn't even actively suspecting her of cheating until a conversation with my friends planted the idea in my head. We were hanging out at a friend's place, chatting about random things, when I casually mentioned how weird my wife had been acting. One of them, half-jokingly, said something that sent a chill down my spine. Maybe her side guy wasn't giving her enough attention. We all laughed, but then he added, "I'm only half-joking. You'd be surprised how much emotional bandwidth women put into affairs." He wasn't saying it with certainty, just as an observation. But that was all it took. The idea started gnawing at me. Was I being naive? Was my wife's mood change a symptom of something far worse than I had imagined? We had always been open with each other, or at least I thought we had. But now I wasn't so sure. She had plenty of time to cheat if she wanted to. And with her sudden emotional distance, it was hard to ignore the possibility. The urge to snoop. I knew that if I really wanted answers, I needed to check her phone. It wasn't something I had ever done before, but my gut was telling me I had to. Her phone's password was no secret to me. The opportunity was there. I just needed to take it. But I hesitated. I kept questioning whether I was overreacting, whether I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. That hesitation didn't last long. The first major red flag. The night after I made my post, My wife came home late from work. That wasn't unusual, but her behavior was. She was distant, more than usual. When I asked her about it, she casually mentioned that she had been stuck in traffic. That would have been believable if it weren't for one problem. Whenever she's running late, she always texts me. Always. This time, nothing. The inconsistency hit me hard. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. It felt too similar to the way she had been acting before. Everything inside me screamed that something wasn't right. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to hesitate anymore. The next chance I got, I was checking her phone. Update 1. The truth unfolds. Now, I understand how men become jaded. It only takes one betrayal to make you question everything you thought you knew about love and trust. I finally got my chance when she went to take a shower. I grabbed her phone and went straight to iMessage. I wasn't sure what I would find, but I knew exactly what I was looking for. If she had an affair partner, there had to be a trail. It didn't take long. I scrolled through her messages, and then I saw a name that I didn't recognize. Josh. My heart dropped. We had always been open with each other about our friends, or so I thought. But I had never heard of this Josh. He had never come up in any conversation, and she had never mentioned knowing someone by that name. At first, the messages seemed innocent. But as I scrolled further, my blood ran cold. There were mentions of a hotel room, a rental car, a trip. For a brief moment, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was planning something with one of her friends. Maybe there was some explanation I wasn't seeing. Then, I scrolled up further. I saw the flirting, the intimate messages, the inside jokes. I saw the date when it had all started. And then it hit me. The first day she started acting distant? It lined up perfectly with their first encounter. Everything clicked. He wasn't just cheating. She was planning a secret getaway with him. In that moment, my entire world shattered. The woman I had loved, the woman I had vowed to spend my life with, had been living a double life. And now I had the proof. That night, I finally had the chance to go through her phone and gather all the evidence I needed. The process was frustrating. It was like reliving the betrayal all over again. It had been a few days since my discovery, and I was still trying to figure out how to handle it. Should I confront her directly, scream and shout, and tell her it's over? Should I retaliate by cheating back? The pain was overwhelming, and what hurt the most was the realization that, no matter what happened, she would likely walk away from this unscathed. Even if I divorced her, she would still move on, while I was left to deal with the emotional wreckage. I hated the entire situation. If any of you have advice, I'm reading all the comments. Just let me know what you think I should do. Edit. Thank you all for your support and suggestions. One of the most popular pieces of advice was to surprise her and her affair partner on their getaway. Logistically, it would be tricky, but the idea resonated with me. I needed to ruin everything for her. I needed her to feel the weight of her actions in the worst way possible. Her trip was coming up soon, so I was preparing to execute my plan. When the time came, I would be back with an update. The key was to make the revelation so brutal that every time she saw her reflection, she would have to blink away the shame. When she found herself sitting alone, wondering how she had lost everything over a meaningless fling, that's when I would know I had truly won. Update 2. I'm back. Even though revenge didn't erase the pain of my wife's betrayal, I have to say, it felt incredibly satisfying. And I have no regrets. After going through her phone, I discovered that she and her affair partner, Josh, had planned a romantic getaway to New Orleans. They had rented a car, mapped out a road trip, and booked an Airbnb. It was the kind of trip I would have loved to take with her, but clearly, she wanted to experience it with someone else. With all the details in hand, her itinerary, emails, and Airbnb booking, I knew exactly when and where to strike. A week before her planned trip, she fed me a fabricated story about attending an old college friend's baby shower. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her. When the day arrived, she left, pretending she was heading to the baby shower. To sell her lie, she even sent me a picture of herself alone in the rental car. Of course, I knew better. Unlike her, I didn't waste time on a road trip. I booked a flight and arrived in New Orleans before she did. It was my first time in the city, but sightseeing was the last thing on my mind. I had to wait a day before executing my plan. According to her itinerary, she and Josh were scheduled for a spa visit to unwind from their long journey. The next day, I video called her out of the blue. She took longer than usual to pick up but eventually answered, claiming she had just arrived at the spa. From the background, I could tell she was telling the truth. I told her I just wanted to see her face, kept the call brief, and then I was out the door, heading straight to the spa. When I arrived, she wasn't in the waiting area. I hadn't fully planned out what to do in that situation, so I decided to wait outside. I didn't want to risk her seeing me before I saw her. After 2 long hours, she and Josh finally emerged, looking relaxed and content. That's when I hit record on my phone and walked toward them. I approached her calmly. No yelling, no cursing, no visible anger. She looked at me, then looked away, and then suddenly jerked back in shock. It took a moment for her to register that I was actually standing there because, in her mind, there was no way I could have been in New Orleans. I just stood there silently, watching her. She froze, while Josh, clearly puzzled, looked between us. I smiled at her, and for a brief moment she seemed to misinterpret it as a sign of forgiveness. She hesitantly reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Then I turned to Josh and said, "Hi, Josh." He responded cautiously, clearly confused. She was stunned that I knew his name. That's when she realized just how much I knew. "Babe," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. We stood there in silence. What felt like 5 minutes was actually less than a minute when I later watched the video. I asked, "Who is this?" She stuttered, then hesitantly called him a friend. I caught Josh's confused expression. Clearly, he had no idea she was downplaying their relationship. I was done with the act. "Is this the baby shower you told me you were going to? Let's stop lying. Just admit it. You, a married woman, drove across states for a romantic getaway with another man. Are you serious?" Somewhere in the middle of my speech, she whispered, "Why are you recording this?" I hadn't even noticed until I re-watched the footage later, but that question infuriated me. She turned to Josh and told him to head to the car, saying she would join him soon. But he didn't move. We were standing in the parking lot, and by now she was trying desperately to explain herself. She couldn't get more than a few sentences out before breaking down into tears, pleading with me. That's where the video ended, because I walked away. She called me repeatedly, but I refused to answer. The pain was still there, yet I felt numb. Strangely, despite my world falling apart, I found myself searching for the best restaurants in New Orleans. I wasn't doing it to cope. I simply wanted to block her out of my mind. Before leaving the city, I made sure to send the video to every single one of her family members and friends. I wanted them to know that our impending divorce had nothing to do with me. It was my way of avoiding blame while ensuring she faced public humiliation. A classic win-win. By the time I got home, she was already back, her trip cut short. She tried to beg again, but I told her there was no point. This time, she sat quietly, knowing she had lost. I packed my things and left the house for good. I hired a divorce lawyer immediately. The process itself was straightforward. She didn't put up much of a fight, though her lawyer demanded alimony and 5 years of rent payments for the apartment we had shared. That was laughable. She got to keep the apartment, and I walked away with our shared car. The court did order me to pay alimony for 3 years, which was infuriating, but ultimately a small price to pay for my freedom. Since then, we've only spoken about legal matters. The last time I saw her, she was drunk, trying to seduce me. I rejected her without hesitation, telling her I wasn't interested in anyone's sloppy seconds. That was the last time we shared the same space. I'm glad it's over. It's been a painful journey, but now it's time to rebuild my life. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that she will never forget what I did to her. Revenge is best served cold.